everybody, and welcome back to our holiday episode of the Cup Reviews, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre. I am your host and co-artistic producer of this lovely little company we have here, Mackenzie, and I'm excited to say for our holiday episode this year, we are doing a very special verbatim wartime musical piece called All Is Calm, The Christmas Truce of 1914, directed by Peter Rothstein and W.J. Lazarus. And this is the 2018 production that was filmed on Broad Stage. And joining me for this panel, I have some very special panelists because all of us have been to what can we call this? I think we can call it a war. We survived a war on stage altogether in our adventures with boxes and really big strange props. And we all did a production of Oh What a Lovely War, a adaptation of Joan Littlewood's avant-garde piece all about World War One. And so, yes, we've banded back together, us band of brothers and sisters. And first off, we have the wonderful Mackenzie Kelly. So, Mackenzie, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who did you play in Oh What a Lovely War, and what is in your cup?
All right. I played Kaiser Wilhelm, as well as various other roles in Germany. I played the entire country of Germany.
You did.
Yes, thank you. And I'm just drinking water in my cup. Gotta stay hydrated, boo-boo.
Exactly. This is true. Just true. Patrick Teed, who we just saw on a recent interview episode. Welcome back. Patrick, give us a lowdown about who you were in Oh What a Lovely War and what is in your cup.
I was Georges Cox from Liverpool. Yes.
And you were a
And
bricklayer, weren't you?
yes. And I have tea in my cup.
Beautiful. I love that Tim Hortons mug.
It
So
holds-
Canadian. And of course, we have our wonderful associate producer here at Cup of Hemlock Theatre. It is the incredible Gillian Robinson. Hello, Jill.
Hello, Mac. How goes it?
It goes. You know, it's a Friday night when we're recording this. It's been a week.
Yes, indeed.
So, Jill, tell us about you and all about your roles that you played in Oh What a Lovely War, and what is in your cup tonight, and what is your ensemble?
All right. Okay, well, ensemble, I just wanted to go for like a neutral vibe tonight. Got the, blacks and whites, hair back, keeping it calm and neutral. But yes, Oh What a Lovely War, similar to Mackenzie, I also played the entire country of Russia. And other roles as well. And
You were Belgium.
Particular, I was Belgium for an opera slice of the play. Yes,
And you were what's her name? The
and
suffragette.
Emmeline Pankhurst.
Yes.
Yeah, Pankhurst's monologue.
Yeah.
That was me.
Love it. And what's in your cup?
I just have some black cinnamon coffee in the cup tonight. So.
Well,
Feeling a bit sleepy. I can definitely pick up on the end of the week vibes, Mac. So coffee it is.
Perfect. And I have some water from my classic silver tankard. So let's dive in to this piece. And let's start off with our first question, which is phrased a little bit differently tonight than what it typically is. So, what did we think of the ensemble cast? Did any performers in particular stand out to you? And Patrick, I will let you start this one.
Oh, nice. So I think as an ensemble cast, I was like truly actually blown away. I think this in general, not to like dive too much into like the piece itself, but I really felt like it worked best when everyone was working together. And I found how the ensemble worked as a unit to be so incredibly compelling. I was always excited when I got to see everyone working together. But there was definitely like a couple of people that I found myself constantly attuned to or pulled into. The first person who comes to my mind is Andrew Hay. He opens the piece and kind of is one of the few people to close it, but he gives this incredible rendition of "Will You Go to Flanders" to open the show, with this incredibly haunting like tenor sound. And I mean, the second he just started singing and there's like smoke behind him, I was like, I'm in. Like I am buying what you're selling. I'm ready for this show. So I think he did the perfect job just setting the stage literally for what was going to unfold. So Andrew Hay is definitely right on the top of my list.
Love it, love it. Mackenzie, I see you nodding along there.
I am also part of the Andrew Hay fan club. But I also want to shout out Randy Schlemming. I hope I said that last name correctly. He did the really excellent Queen's Own monologue, where he was like on the box and was like, "We're not going to war, man." And it was incredible. I really loved him. And then he like came back later as the German, again, not to get too much into it, but also amazing. And I just agree with Patrick. Like the lives of like everybody in the background at all times were incredibly rich, that it was so difficult to choose like favorites, if you will, because like they were all so compelling. And the synchronicity, got me. So good. So
Agreed. Jill?
Well, I'm just going to pick up what everyone's putting down in the Andrew Hay department. He was definitely on my list as a standout amongst all of them, really. But similar to what Patrick had said about Andrew opening the play for us. And he, at least to my eyes, was one of the younger actors on stage. So, and to me, having him catapult the show too, it just kind of reminded me directly of what the age of some of the men who were present at the truce would have possibly been, or the bulk of them would have maybe been Andrew's age. So that also added like a layer of goosebumps for me. But similar to what Mackenzie Patrick already said, like the whole ensemble was absolutely stunning, so cohesive. Like Patrick saying, everyone acted like a unit. Like the choral bits were, I welled up. Like I got so emotional with it. And everyone's accent work was impeccable. So I shout out Andrew Hay. I'm also going to shout out Paul Cote. Apologize if I'm mispronouncing your last name. He had really good caricature work. He had a little bit more of either the funny, hammy, or boisterous characters. And I thought he did really well. But there were a handful of them who had to bop between so many different accents. And I just think the dialect work was impeccable. Yeah.
Love that. Well, I will say for me, this was just such a great cohesive ensemble. And the behind the scenes featurette was really great in the sense that it showed how important it was to have this group of men connected and in sync with each other, because if it didn't work, you would know so fast that somebody was off the track. And I mean, somehow whoever cast this show was so good at finding people who had some natural synergy and chemistry with one another. I mean, just seeing their camaraderie together backstage was just really exemplified what made the show special, which was the care and dedication all these men had to each other and how much they invested in one another. And that's why for me, I couldn't pick a standout, because this was just such a great piece, because it was basically a baton pass the whole time. It was just this ongoing relay where everybody played their part, and the minute somebody finished their moment, the next person was right on there. And the fact that the program didn't feature headshots, you just slowly saw the name of the cast scroll by at the end, really just showed how this piece wasn't about singling out one person. It was about the group of men who experienced this event, and that's what's really special. So yeah, for me, I just go everybody just nailed it out of the park. This is just such a beautiful piece. Awesome. Jill, I'll let you start this next one, which is, what was your favorite production or design element?
So this is a wonderful sort of launch pad about the ensemble-esque nature of the piece, because the musicality for me was my standout favorite. Again, for folks who have seen this, or even if you don't see it, but hear of it, there's not a single instrument on stage or track being played throughout pretty much this entire piece. And it's all based on their own voices together. And correct me if I'm wrong, folks, but I don't think there was a pitch, like a tuning.
They had one
or a pitch
backstage.
pipe.
They had one backstage, but they never blew it on stage.
Right. So that takes, like, all of these men must have perfect pitch, because they are just like stunning, and the amount of dexterity and dynamic that is brought to each of their individual voices, and then to chorally be able to kind of melt yourself with everyone else at the same time as creating like an emotional impact. It's very, very difficult to do as a musician. For folks listening who aren't musicians, that is like incredibly difficult. And it takes literally militaristic discipline to get to that sort of level. So the fact that it was so impeccable really married itself to what the whole piece was. They were supposed to be a band of brothers, a group of soldiers, kind of doing this together. And it just created a brilliant ambiance throughout the entire, like the peaks and valleys of the whole show. So musicality got my fave production vote for sure.
Love it. Mackenzie?
Yeah, no, I'm totally piggybacking what Jill just said. Like they would all be singing a different harmony at some point. And it's like, how many of them are there? There's like, what, at least 10 of them?
Yeah.
Something like that, so. Around 10.
Yeah, there's
and like, they're each singing a different part. And sometimes when they would sing in different keys, oh my God, they're all singing the exact same song, but in like 4 different keys.
And sometimes different languages. Yep.
Yeah. Oh my God. No words. Absolutely no words. It was insane.
Patrick?
The second Jill said the music, I was like, oh darn it. Yeah. But yeah, no, for me, I guess I'll go more specific, because like both Mackenzie and Jill have like spoken to obviously the incredible caliber of the performers, but also I was just struck by the arrangements themselves. Like the music director who did the arrangements, like, I mean, he had to design that that Silent Night that had literally 3 different keys with different cadences, and like the musical skill it would take to figure out how that could work like contrapuntally and not sound like really unsettling to the ear. Like I actually cannot wrap my mind around that. I really want to see the score that he put together. And there were other songs that like I was like, oh, now I want to listen to this, and I found myself like looking through different recordings, and none of them were compelling in the same way. And I was like, oh, like the music director actually really did a truly incredible job just arranging this to make the music perfectly haunting, so incredibly powerful, like so complex. So the arrangements themselves of the music was a huge part for me.
And this show featured several songs that all 3 of you had to learn and tackle. So, I mean, for the 3 of you, was there any song that when you heard it gave you flashbacks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Every single song they sang that we sang, I was like, I was having flashbacks. Like,
but it's interesting. It's interesting too, like the type, like for example, like Tipperary in this show, versus like what we had done with War, where, not going too much far into it, but like Mackenzie, you and I were like injured soldiers at that point, and the boys were lifting us off its stretchers and then singing post that. So like it was cool to hear the same song, but like have like a different emotional experience tied to it than what we had to do or what we kind of approached songs with. So but again, I just remember watching being like, oh, there's a lot of similar tracks, but I'm like, oh no, these were just the songs of the era, and literally the songs the boys sang in the trenches. Like that's why the scores kind of overlap and are similar.
And then to piggyback off that, like both the ways that some songs, like you say Tipperary, we had like completely kind of divergent interpretations, but then songs like Old Lang Syne, which it's like, oh, they fulfilled like basically identical functions in both and All Is Calm. And I thought that was also interesting. Like what songs seem to have more of a fixed story almost that they tell within the context of like exploring World War I, and then what songs kind of are able to be more divergent. But like Old Lang Syne, I think for me is definitely the one that I had a huge flashback to, because that song was just also, I think it was a very special experience for a lot of us in war, but especially like the guys, and we worked on it a lot and stuff. So it was really very special to see that done again.
Yeah. I'll say the one flashback I keep having is every time they sing Silent Night was seeing Mackenzie climb over the boxes with like her deer in headlights face. Like just that face.
It's the big eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Just the hands up, and it was really interesting how they also used boxes in this too, and just how the staging was very similar. And I was like, interesting how these moments lend themselves to almost mere staging of what you have to do. I'll say for me though, my favorite element, because I was like, I know Bry's going to pick the music. So I'm going to be a contrarian on this and try and have it another element. Excuse me. And so for me, mine was the lighting, because it was simple, yet so stunning. Like from the moment the show opens with that kind of hazy light coming through and the men emerging from the mist in that soft light was gorgeous. And then you had the moon show up at one point and the stars and the snow, and how it kind of went from a cool blue to a bit more of a warmer blue, and then how it went back to a kind of a harder black again, like the emptiness of the blackness when everybody went back to war. And the one gentleman was having this monologue about how the British were the first to break the truce and shoot the German on the trench. Just how they captured the emptiness of war, and yet how these men kind of emerged and brought light into this big, vast black space of death that they were living in, was just fantastic. It really did feel like a ghost story, and that's what the Featurette was talking about. Is how they really wanted this to feel almost like the spirits that come back to tell their story. And so, it was great. The lighting just added such a nice natural ambiance to the piece. Yeah, perfect. Patrick, you wanted to start this next question, so I'll volley it to you. And that was, what was the weakest aspect of the production? Could you find a weakest aspect?
So in general, I really do think this show is it actually was really incredible, and I'm like a very harsh critic. But I actually really do think that the verbatim text of letters they chose a lot of the time did not serve the piece, and I found that at least to the level that I often felt like it was so much less compelling than the music itself and what they were able to do with the music, that there were so, even though I love verbatim theater and I think the conceit is really cool, but I often found myself dissatisfied with, I don't know if it's the text they chose or the way that text ultimately got weaved into the piece, but which sucks for a show where it's obviously there's something really significant about being able to take the words of the soldiers themselves. And there were absolutely moments that were really incredibly effective for me, like the moment when the one soldier is oh, and we were the ones that broke the truce, and I wish we hadn't, or a couple of the soldiers who were also poets and their text. But there were also just moments that I was I feel like this is taking me, I found myself so pulled in by the music, and some of these turns to verbatim text actually just were kind of taking me out of the kind of emotional space that I felt both the music and also so much of the lighting and staging was doing. I'm sure that's a controversial.
I'll piggyback off you on this, because you actually brought into clarity a bit more for me my note, which was that the beginning to getting into the trench took a long bit of time, that I felt you could have shaved some time, and the fact that we went through so many verbatim letters of leaving, and the fact that they didn't set these people up as characters that you wanted to invest in and follow, meant that the letters kind of, while they were interesting to read or hear read to you, weren't really necessary. Like, you could have done that in like 2 or 3 letters versus like 8 or however many it was, because the songs, as you said, Patrick, were doing such a good job of naturally getting things going, because they have packed up your troubles in your old kit bag, right? As they're marching, which I mean, we did the similar thing in a What a Lovely War, and so it does that. You're right, the music did a lot of the lifting, that sometimes you didn't need the verbatim letter to show up. And now that you pointed that out, I'm like, aha, that's what it was. Because for me, I was like, the beginning was a little bit too long, but now I'm like, now I know why. It's because they put a little bit too much time into the beginning with these letters that then kind of drag getting into the trench. And because the set really doesn't change and you can't really get passage of time visually, it's kind of hard to track that. Like, at least when we did A Lovely War, not to compare and contrast, but we're gonna end up doing it. Like, we have projections that showed like the map and you guys moving along, like kind of like Indiana Jones flying in the plane to get you to the different locations, which was really handy. So yeah, that's me. I see Jill nodding. So Jill, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I just, because I can speak kind of against what you and Mac are saying, but on a later question. So I'll pin in. It's not totally against, because I do understand what you both are saying about some of the passages. This, like, I don't have a weakest element, just to kind of preface, but to talk, just to piggyback off of you two, I do agree some of the passages, like you're saying, Mac, right, if we shaved off maybe like 1 or 2 of like each section, and I think it's difficult with each individual passage, because what I really liked with this production too is they would sign off whose voice you just heard, and there was such a variance of the type of people that we were hearing from, that I think that kind of like, there's different like weighing options about like who we're hearing from, right? Like, what's your rank? What country are you from? What are you saying? Is this a letter to a loved one, or is this like a playsome sort of journal passage that you wrote? Like, I think because every chunk is so individualistic, it kind of made it hard to ground yourself in each passage. So just to kind of like speak to that. But overall, I didn't have a weakest aspect. And I think to kind of go with what you were saying, Mac, about one of your favorite elements of like the simplicity and the neutralness like that the lighting offered, I think that also reified in the set and the costume pieces. And it just really reflected that dark and dismal environment that these men were constantly in, either literally in the trenches or in their minds, right? I think it just did a really good wash of shades of what war is, literally and metaphorically. And I thought every element kind of did that to the point where I think, again, I'll get into this farther down, but like I think this show is more of like in memoriam versus performance. And I think every element kind of did its duty to go that path.
Mackenzie?
I have piggybacks for all of you.
Yay!
Piggybacks all around. So I will first begin with Jillian's piggyback, as it was the most recent. I agree so much about your point about like the different voices and representation. And I actually really appreciated that the group of performers that were brought into this show varied so drastically in age and like appearance and all of this, because I feel like war plays so often are everybody is like a very fit 18 to 30-year-old man, and they're all, you know, all of that stuff. But when these wars were happening, and especially during like the later portions of war, when they were conscripting people that they weren't accepting at, you know, the beginning of the war because it was desperate. The battlefield did look varied. It was like men who were old enough to be your father or your father's father with very young, like, boys even. So I very much appreciated that. It felt, it added a sense of like grounded realism for me that I feel like I miss a lot when I watch like wartime theatrical pieces specifically. And then to kind of piggyback on what you guys were saying about the text, I also really love the verbatim text. But with that being said, when they did all of the like letters where they were leaving and everybody read a different letter, I was like, oh, this is going to be really cool. Maybe we're following like these people, and that there would be like several letters or journal entries from like each of these people. And I would sometimes find it really difficult to grasp the levity of or anti-levity. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I didn't get to sit with any of them. There wasn't like air for me to sit with them, which could actually
brevity. Yeah.
Which could actually be like a wonderful element that they were trying to achieve by saying like these men's lives were so fleeting, so we don't get a portion of it. Like this is all that's left. We could look at it that way. But yeah, and then if otherwise, I would almost want them to use the spoken text for like high impact moments and maybe use it like slightly more sparingly so that the impact of it was greater. But that's like, it is such a like a tiny nitpicky thing. It really didn't take too much away from me at all. And yeah.
Well said, one and all. Mackenzie, I'll let you start this next one since you wrapped up our last question, which is, what does the addition of the documentary featurette add to your viewing experience?
Okay, so I love knowledge, like a lot. And I'm like the person who has rewatched the Finding Annie documentary like at least 5 times. Yeah, and the whole like behind the scenes process, doesn't matter how long I've been in the arts industry, like behind the scenes process, the casting process, like the creative process, it intrigues me. I want to know it all. So I really love seeing all the behind the scenes stuff because it makes me, it satiates my need to know it all. And so I just like enjoy watching that and then looking back at the production being like, oh yeah, did you know they did that because of this reason? Crazy, right? I know. Wow. So I really enjoyed it.
Love that. Patrick?
Yeah, I think I'm mixed on like documentary featurettes. I think part of me is like one of the things I really like about art is the opacity of it and how like obviously there are all of these choices being put into a show, but one of the things I really like is that, you know, it's actually up to the audience, like how those choices are read, like what they find in these pieces. And part of me is like, I get frustrated when choices are told to us or like we're given the readings, because I'm like, you're taking away our task. But then the other part of me as a like artist and creator, I like love hearing about people's processes, what they're trying to communicate, how they arrive at these things. So I think I have like a complex ambivalence to documentary featurettes about pieces themselves, where it's like part of me is like I want the art to stand on itself, and I don't want to bring even the director, the music director's reading of what's going on into the piece. But then also I want to know how it happened. So yeah, complex ambivalence.
Yeah, love that. Jill?
Yeah, I'm kind of picking up what you're both putting down, because I'm exactly like Mackenzie. Like, I'm like, give me all the knowledge, give me all the facts, give me all the dramaturgy behind a performance. I say that as a joke because everyone sitting in this room despised how many times I used that word during our production of What a Lovely War.
My headphone fell out, but I immediately knew you said dramaturgy.
Your headphone fell out, or you took it out, Mackenzie. Don't lie.
What? Sorry. Oh no.
But then I totally get where Patrick's coming from as well. Like, but I think in a way, because I love the fact, right, like art has the capacity to sort of make an impact on every single person, like industry personnel and not, and in so many different shapes and forms. So it is good to sometimes just like sit with a piece. And I think this piece in particular does so many emotional roller coaster vibes, depending on who's viewing it. So it's neat to just kind of sit with that. But then I think, yeah, because this was based on a lived live event, like it was nice to have the featurette to sort of, to like sit back, enjoy the rest of your drink, and kind of crack open the inside of this beast of a project. Because to me, this featurette in particular was like such a VIP access into the immense actor prep, and like the hearing from the actors' mouths, like the technicality that they had to get behind when it came to the music, right? And I just really love hearing the groundwork, like from as like a musician myself. Like it's so neat to hear people's sort of blueprint technicality when approaching a beast of a piece like this. And then just I knew that the piece had verbatim chunks with primarily of the text, but again, it was nice hearing the actors reflect on that, or hearing our creator reflect on that. And it just again, it kind of just like the history and the gravitas that the content of this piece sort of requires and stimulates, and then how that's sort of carried through. And we also got to know a little bit about our costume designer and the lighting designer. They got a choice to speak too, and just a lot of dramaturgical fleshing out of every which way was featured in the featurette. So yeah, I loved it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, similar to Mackenzie and Jill, for me, getting like film theater, I've always loved the behind the scenes looks. I've sat through the Lord of the Rings extended edition behind the scenes stuff, the multiple hours of things, many times just to pick up on new details, or listening to a director's or actor's commentary track just to hear their inner thoughts of as they view a piece is fascinating to me. It just gives me a greater appreciation for the art and the work that went into what I watched. And that's exactly what this did. I came away from this piece going, I really liked it, and I acknowledged how much work and dedication went into it. But it wasn't until I saw the featurette, which was a beautiful palette cleanser, it really brought home the piece. Because as Mackenzie was saying, by not having the through line of the performers as characters, I was like, oh yeah, everybody did a nice job and did their job well. It wasn't until you actually got to hear the performers speak as themselves about the experience and about the work that you went, okay, now I have even a greater appreciation for what you just did for me. And also the fact that the creative team got featured, like seeing that wonderful BIPOC costume designer, getting to talk about his work. And you would think, oh, it's a black costume. It's a black t-shirt. Like, how hard is that? But it's like, no, he like the amount of effort and work he put into figuring out who like just because we're all in shades of black doesn't mean that choices of what you wear is any less hard. And so having him featured to talk about his work, or seeing the amount of effort that the writer put into this piece, the amount of research, the fact he went over to Belgium and to Germany, and really you can see he just took the time to hone and research and make this piece as historically accurate as he possibly could. Just once again, it builds everything up so much, and heightens it to a much greater level. That I actually went back and rewatched it after watching the featurette, and I had an even deeper gratitude and appreciation for this performance that was being done for me. So for me, I was like, that's beautiful. I mean, Stratford does their featurette separately on their feeds, and I'd almost encourage more companies to do this type of thing, have the ability to watch the behind the scenes, because I think particularly for theater, film is known for having the behind the scenes DVD featurettes, but so often in theater nobody sees behind the curtain and the work that goes into creating a piece, because a lot of times it's very messy. And it's not always nice. I mean, we all were in that rehearsal room, and all had some snaps at each other at certain points. Those boxes created a lot of tension in our production. So yes, it's sometimes hard to show that type of thing, but I think audiences will have a greater appreciation for theater when they have more accessibility to look behind the scenes. And if a company has the budget to allow for a videographer to come in and document the creative process, I think that is a really neat thing. And clearly the Broad Stage company saw the power of this piece and went, we got to highlight what went on to make this piece what it was. And it was really well done and a really good idea. So yes, I loved it. Awesome. Okay, Mackenzie, I'll let you wrap up this section with the would you recommend this production to others?
Yes, no, 100%. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so good. Everybody, go and watch it immediately.
Love that. Jill?
Yes, 1000%. Watch the show and the featurette.
Mm-hmm.
I think the coupling together, like, it does a really good, and I don't know about y'all, but like I had a really good history teacher for grade 10, like shout out Mr. Domovich, thank you so much. But like I would love to see this production. You know how in high school there was always like a Friday of the month where your English teacher or a class would just put on a movie, or it would be like a movie component with questions or something.
Yes.
This would be such an awesome educational tool, because like I'll get into this in a further question, but like this is a perfect snapshot of a moment in history that is so important and should always be remembered. And the fact that we had the opportunity to see it, I want to say as closely as I mean, obviously the disparities and the violence is not there. Bookending the truce. But the fact that it's actual like historical, like nonfiction text, it's from men's voice of this time, and it's put into bodies and human breath, and as opposed to learning via our textbooks or like a documentary, like it's like using art as an educational tool, and like stuff like this, I would love to see. As like Friday in your history elective. Oh, and look, we're also studying about World War I. How wonderful is this? So good. So good.
Jill, I'll piggyback because I really had the same note as you, which is this piece should be shown in schools in history classes as part of the World War I unit. So in the minute you said, I was like, damn it, Jill, you took my line. But it's so true, because yeah, like so often in history, you often get the Hollywoodized pieces being shown, Band of Brothers, or I remember one history teacher showed it, Saving Private Ryan as a piece, and I was like, lovely. But yeah, this piece is so beautifully unique. I mean, I'd even show this in a theater, like high school drama class, as an example of different styles of theater. Because I mean, when I was at York doing devised theater, I was introduced to so many different ways of performance, whether it was multimedia, verbatim, physical theater. This is such a great example of verbatim theater, where you go, here is exactly how you could interpret something literally and bring it to life, or documentary style. This is like documentary verbatim hybrid theater in a way.
If I can just quickly jump on that, this is one thing I forgot to say too, Mac, of going to the whole like showing it for theater students or theater practitioners. I think definitely put this in your arsenal of like what a superhuman performer is and how to aspire the like technical discipline and diligence to any performance, but especially with this piece in particular. I just think like it's definitely a masterclass on like precision and like actor as vehicle. Yeah.
Yeah. And and I mean, last thing I'll say is I'm showing this to my family over the holidays. Like my grandfather, showing this to him because he loves all these old songs. So this is like right up his alley. Like, this is a perfect, accessible piece for all audience members. This isn't a highbrow bit of art for only the theatrical people who understand the piece. So this is a very down to earth, lowbrow, highbrow mix, whatever you want to call it exactly. But it's just a beautifully accessible piece. That I just go. It should be seen by all. Every Remembrance Day, this should be shown. And I think the score should be available. So it's going to be taught in high schools as well as with concert choirs and choirs, so they can have these arrangements because they are stunning. So bravo. Patrick, round us out in this section.
No, I would not. No, I'm kidding. No, of course. Yeah. I mean, what else is there to say? You know, I mean, in general, I always love getting people to watch like chamber musicals. I love ensemble pieces. I love stripped down theater. I hate a jukebox show, but you know, never say never, and they made it work. So yeah, no, like every element is just really compelling. And I think like in general, this is exactly the kind of theater I love getting more and more people attuned to. So yeah, yes. Have already recommended it to some people actually.
Love it. Perfect. All right, let's head into the next section, which is more of a play text-based question section. So first off, we have this play is constructed almost entirely through from first-person testimony from the soldiers and others. Quoted verbatim. What does this dramaturgical choice do? Patrick, I'll let you lead this section off because you ended our last section.
Yeah, I also feel like I kind of already spoke to this a bit.
You hinted at it.
I think at the level of ideas, it's very cool, but in its execution, I'm not the biggest fan. But I would actually bracket that because I think the other thing I've been thinking about is how the music is itself also verbatim text. Like so many of these songs were literally like written by soldiers during the war. And I think that is for me such an interesting way to explore like kind of the emotional state and kind of the humanity of these soldiers. Like, I mean, when you think about like the kind of combination of like despair and strange, darkly comic humor that goes into like the creation of a song like what's the title name of the Old Battalion? It's the Old Battalion, right?
Yeah,
the Old Battalion, right? Like the kind of like so much is revealed in a song like that about what these men were going through, that they're just like singing this like major key as they're talking about soldiers hanging on barbed wire. Like that to me is so like that can tell me so much more about the condition of the trenches than like anything in a textbook or even like for me like a letter. And so the music as an element of the verbatim piece itself, I think was like extraordinary as an inroad into understanding like what was it actually like for these men. You know, that you arrive at something like that as a song you sing.
Love that. Jill, let's have you go next because you seem to be nodding along.
Sure, yeah, picking up again everything that Patrick was putting down. And to again go off, I feel like I've said a lot about this section too, and just to kind of go back and expand a bit more too. I really think because a lot of this is rooted in verbatim of text and musicality, is also verbatim as Patrick mapped out. It really just again is like, to me, this was more of like a memoriam than a performance. And yeah, I feel like we don't get that often when it's either you're learning facts about the war or it's a show about the war. And this kind of like navigated both because a lot of the text was nonfiction. So yeah, it was like a very different learning experience about the war for me, and also learning experience about the performing of what war is. So yeah, I would love to see this as like Patrick was saying, or sorry, like Mac, you were saying, having the score available for like choirs to sing it, or having like a staged sort of concert setting of this. So yeah, so sorry, going back to more of the verbatim, I also think it just adds like an element of like respect and honor for our vets in a way that, again, we'll get into this, but other media sometimes glorifies or fetishizes. And I think even though we've talked about some of the chunks being similar to each other or not being able to sink into what they're saying, I think at the end of the day, the fact that it's raw words spoken by a soldier in a raw moment, I almost admire more, and I have more respect for than like a scripted, glorified hero speech kind of that I think other media does for us. Yeah, and I think it overall, this piece, like through it being actual soldiers' voices, like it's literally lifting the voices of those who have fallen. So, and I think Patrick did a really good job of saying with the music literally does that as well. And because the music is from the same verbatim family, like we're literally putting them on notes kind of. And yeah, I'm rambling now. So Mackenzie.
Yes, no, I totally agree with both of you. Not sure I have a whole lot to add to everything that you've said. I know, like, for me, there are like key passages that really stick out, like when toward the beginning, when that man says he like saw his friend die and didn't take anything from him, and he'd never find another friend again, and like later, like feelings of emptiness and like eternal emptiness, like never feeling happy again. And I feel like for me, that added a lot of life for people who, didn't get to tell their story or didn't choose to tell their story, upon their return. There are countless families who have nothing to pass down because, frankly, who are you going to talk to in your family that understands what you went through? Like, it's an inconceivable thing for anybody who didn't experience it. And I think in those moments, it did a really great job at cracking the door open for everybody else to try to see what it was actually like, and like the unheroic parts of heroism.
Yeah. For me, so this choice of giving this choice gives the piece an authenticity, which is nice. Really nice giving these men their honest voices. That this isn't glorified or Hollywoodized for an audience, but is really the authentic voice coming through. However, as Mackenzie's previously pointed out, by the way they've done it, where they're always signing off on the letter, you're first led to believe, oh, I'm following, I don't know, Robert Hitchens, 41st Battalion, whatever. And this is going to be a story, but then they're changing people. So for me, I would have loved to have just kept the text, but take the name off. So then it just becomes the voice of one of the many men that are there, that you're not assigning it to one, because then in your mind because you're not specifying if it is the same person or not, you're just saying this is somebody's voice from the trench. You're allowing your mind will naturally just start connecting the dots of, oh, you're still the same person who spoke at the beginning, because you're using the same accent and the same physicality to yourself. And I think that would have allowed for a greater connection of performer to character, which would have allowed a greater connection of the moment, because without the connection, the stakes, like the stakes were not as high to me, in the sense of when that German comes over the trench and puts down his gun and puts his hands up, because I haven't really connected to him as that character. I just know, oh, he's the German because he's wearing the German helmet and he's coming up over the side of the box. This is this moment. It's like, okay, I know that we're at Christmas Truce. I know this is what's going to happen. But versus, say, Mackenzie's moment, where somehow she was able to imbue her character doing that and connect with the audience. And yeah, like for me, I just go, I think by removing the name and just having it as the voice of the many, you kind of are able to mentally kind of wrap and get yourself into who this person was, and therefore create kind of a character of your own brain, using your own a bit of imagination of who is this man who's speaking to me. So for me, I go, like, I love the choice of you having their voices and not Hollywoodizing them, but I also go, I think they could have done a little bit more drama, in the words of Jill, dramaturgy, to kind of meld it and not fictionalize it, but meld it so you can connect with these people even further, and get a stronger through line of this piece instead. So yeah, for me, I still love it. Like, yeah, like that, the two speeches, the one about the friend having to bury the friend who died, and then the angry monologue of the British breaking the truce, were the two highlight monologue moments of the piece for me. So yeah, that's all I have to say. I'm rambling, as Jill would say. Speaking of Jill, we'll let you lead this next one, which is, because this piece relies so heavily on theatricality and ensemble work to bring it to life, do you think the written text alone would carry as much weight if read instead of watched?
So I want to say maybe. I feel like I was like hypnotized by the musical cohesiveness throughout a lot of this piece, that obviously I remember the passages and I remember sitting in this, but like it was like the choral moments, breathing together, in sorrow together, in jest with each other, that I remember the most about this piece. So that's why I say maybe, because I know all of these passages, like they do pack a punch on their own. Mm-hmm. But I fear that just by reading it from a page, like reading this whole production, like let's say like libretto, like the actual lyrics of the music with the passages sprinkled in between, I don't think it would pack as much of a punch as the production itself does, because I think it is like the devised element that this piece offers, and the collectivity and grouping and movement and musicality and all of those packaged together is what makes like the heartbeat of what this piece actually is. And again, as I had said before too, the fact that this was a lived true event, and that we're getting it as close as we can get by having like own breath and bodies tell the story. Mm-hmm. So it's an oral like it's a storytelling. This piece to me is storytelling, is the way to absorb this piece. And, you know, not to say that one person can't just read the script and also orate, but it's different. It's the team. It's the group that sort of launch pads what I think this piece is. And this is kind of going back to when we originally started, like just slightly criticizing the verbatim passages. There was such a lovely boomerang effect of these like stoic, static passages. And then you instantly was kind of backed with like a musical meditation. And it's that sort of like peak and valley that you wouldn't get from just reading off a page. Arguably, you also wouldn't get from just hearing it as like the soundtrack, because I think it needs like the battlefield and the trench life. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's me.
Patrick? Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything Jill just said. I guess I would just say I think this piece could work, because for me, like this piece really lives in the chorus. And so it doesn't work without a group of people collectively staging it. I do think it could work even more stripped down, which is not to think I think that this was like an extravagant interpretation what they did, but I think like if you saw a concert production of this, I think it actually really still could hold like a lot of the complexity and depth in the same way, and in new ways and in not the same ways, right? But I think the piece lives in the chorus, and so the starting point has to be with having a group of people doing it together, so that all of the like really incredibly complex kind of interrelations between harmonies between, like Jill was just saying, like music and text, because those are some of my favorite moments with text when it was interlayered into singing. Without that, I absolutely don't think it would read at all. Even I think I might think it's quite chaotic.
Yeah.
But I think you could like absolutely do like a concert production of this, and it would be really, really compelling as well.
Yes. Mackenzie?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you both. I think it would carry some weight as just like a text. Like if you were to slap it down in front of me and tell me to read it on my morning commute, I'm sure that I would not be happy by the time I reached my destination. But I feel as though, especially in the year of our Lord 2021, there is such a separation between these people and us. So it's no longer like, oh yeah, I knew people who went to war. Oh yeah, my dad went to war. My grandfather went to war. It's now like, this is my great, great, great grandfather would have been in this war. And I think by like doing it theatrically, it helps to reestablish it as an actual event without like of not just theoretical people who lived once upon a time in a magical land. It's like these were your friends, these were your neighbors, these were real life breathing men, women, children, etc., who experienced this, and it helps us to like rehumanize everything so that the impact of it is actually impactful.
Well said. Yeah, for me, I go, no, you need the theatricality, because this very much could just be a history booklet of a collection of wartime letters and poetry written from the trenches centered around the Christmas Truce. Like, you can do it that way. And I mean the fact that when you see in the behind the scenes featurette, the guy pulls out literally just a big songbook of World War I songs, like that right there, when it's on the page, yes, it can be beautiful to read, but it's the performer's elevation of the text that's what makes this piece stand out more. Because if not, this could just become a what's his name, George Burns, no, the one who did the Civil War documentary, Ken Burns. This could just become a Ken Burns documentary reading. If you which is good. I mean, that does work sometimes, but I think what makes this piece special is the theatricality that you see on stage that heightens the text and the music to another level, and that is that there.
I think just to speak to that really quickly too, Mac, like I think all of us can sort of put their brains on this as well with like some similar, this piece similarly with Oh, What a Lovely War. It's like, it's vignette-esque.
Yes.
Like it's kind of episodic in a way. At least that's what Oh, What a Lovely War felt like as well.
Yep.
And I think it's in pieces like this as like, it's the moments in between, like the moment when you flip the page to the next vignette or the next section. As a performer, that's our job. Our job becomes like those moments in between and like stringing, moving to the next thing. Like literally, what is the movement sequence that gets us into the next thing? Or like, how is we evolving to the, because I think you're right, Mac, there is a way of this sort of being like an anthology of soldier monologues, which is equally as compelling and amazing.
You could do a really cool piece that way.
but it's the moments in between that I think you would lose. Yeah, you would lose. Those would just be a turn of a page kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, like the connective tissue is so key. And I mean, my favorite connective tissue was when you all were marching to the front, and Mackenzie was at the back of the line, being very grumpily marching along. Was fantastic. Exactly, but that's exactly like there was that montage connection between the level ups, as it were. That's what made our piece really special, was these intercut pieces, and that's exactly what this piece is. Well, like, you're hit on the head, Jill. It's the in between that makes this piece breathe and live. Yeah, exactly. All right, final question of the day for this review, and Mackenzie will let you close this out, which is, how does this play fit into our historical and or pop culture perceptions of World War I?
I feel like maybe if this was asked 10 years ago, my answer would be slightly different. I feel like there has been a lot of recent like dialogue and kind of reevaluation of what everything was in a new light. I feel like it was known, and like after the war ended, more information, and people knew. And then somewhere along the way, it became like romanticized in a way as this bold, hero story for you to come out a burly, strong man and sweep your little girl off her feet. I don't know. And now I feel like it's reverting back to what are the facts. And I think that part of it has to do with generational knowledge loss. Like we realized, oh my goodness, the people who lived through the First and the Second World War are very quickly not going to be with us anymore. And we need to get a real understanding of what their stories are before they are no longer around, which I think contributed to it. And then we saw it with movies like Dunkirk, which was excellent. Another recommendation if you're interested. Where the focus was on more like accurate storytelling, where it was less about the romanticizing, it was less about the Hollywood effects, the big budget blockbusters, and more about like actual stories. And I think this piece fits right into that, in a beautiful place between, where it's very factual and it's very poignant, but it has some theatric elements, and especially with the scoring, which is so impactful, as we've discussed at length, but is elevated. That's the word. It's elevated.
I'll piggyback, because Mackenzie, you hit on a similar note to mine, which is, this is very much a bridge piece for World War I work, because you have the plethora of history documentaries that are just fact-based. This is war started here, this was the battle, this is when the mustard gas was started, this is when the tanks were first introduced, XYZ. And then you have the Hollywoodized recountings of World War I, like Band of Brothers, 1917, things like that are just kind of like a little bit more fantastical, a little bit more grand, let's say. And then you have this piece, which is the middle ground of, it's sticking very strongly to the historical facts and not wavering, because it's verbatim in documentary style theater. But as Mackenzie said, it is elevated and heightened historical work, because no soldier, I highly doubt the soldiers singing like 8-part harmony as they marched to war. But we know they sang songs because it was a way to entertain themselves. So there's a bit of that, bit of heightened, bit of theatricality that is there. but we are still very much grounded in the reality of this time, of this moment of World War One, Christmas 1914. So yeah, I think this is very much a bridging piece, and that'd be the way I would describe it. Yeah, Jill, I see you nodding.
Yeah, because I think you put that perfectly, Mac, for how I kind of see this piece as well, fitting into historically and pop culturally. Because this is like a bit of a tangent, but it does tie in what we're speaking about. Prior to us working on A What a Lovely War, I knew more about World War II. And I think a lot of people are like this. And I think part of that, again, this is just me stating my opinion, so maybe not, but it's the, like similar to what Mackenzie was saying earlier, like some of us maybe still do have relatives that were in World War II or in that war, or have had family members and stories taken from that war. So it's a little bit more in the front of our minds. I also think World War II had an enemy. Like, of course, it was both Germany against the Allies, but there was Hitler, right? There was like a villain. There was a personification of danger, of power. Whereas World War One, it's a bit more of a wash in a sense that it is just masses of bodies mustard gassing each other. And it almost like there's a bit of a dehumanizing it with World War One that unfortunately I think, unless you've seen those documentaries, unless you've played World War One video games, or you've seen the sort of Hollywood, it takes a while to get back in, like to get into that era. There's really like basically what I'm saying is there's a lot going against staying rooted in what World War One was. And we should never forget that. But I think I think with this piece, it really is like you're saying, Mac, like it's that middle ground. It's lifting enough, not like we talked about earlier, like not glorifying, not fetishizing. And it's this calm, like eerie, everyday sort of simplistic retelling. And through like a performative narrative, I think as audience members, we are able to, similar to what Patrick was talking about earlier, we're able to take that art and like absorb it and interpret it how we want, as opposed to learning it through a certain lens, right? Like having it fed to us through a textbook, or having it through like the edge of your seat, constantly moving camera of 1917. Like with this one, you can kind of pick which moments you want to ground yourself in. So, yeah, like props to this piece. I think doing all of like bringing back all of that I think through pop culture and history, it's slowly losing gravitas of this moment in particular and this war in particular. So yeah, bit of a tangent, but that's my answer.
It made sense to me.
Okay.
It made sense to me, Jill. It made sense to me. Patrick, conclude our review for us. Bring us home.
Yeah. So, luckily this is like the first time I'm like, I don't think I've really been scooped. So, yeah. So I think bits have been scooped, of course. I think like we're living in a really interesting moment in terms of cultural representations of the world wars. Like we are actually post like Mackenzie was saying, these like really clean, heroic representations that historically were told, or it was like, oh, guy goes, guy fights bad guy is hero. And now there's like this obsession with like the fetish of the grittiness of it all. And like we've done this kind of reverse thing where in order to understand the suffering of the soldiers, people constantly want to see more and more gratuitous suffering, more and more gritty details, right? Like 1917, I think it's really striking just how much they imbue in every moment this like fetish of grotesque detail. And this is obviously much better than like being like war is not suffering, but I think there's still something really interesting and actually dangerous about that kind of turn, because it doesn't actually attend to the suffering on its own terms, and instead it tries to like making it hyper visible, it erases that what was terrible for these men most of the time was just like their quotidian day-to-day life, right? Of like just like the everyday of living in the trenches. And so like I was reading a review of this piece, and I was really struck because a reviewer for the New York Times, actually, I'm pretty sure, was like, oh, I think this was like too sanitized. It didn't show the suffering enough. And I think that is the logical outcome of this cultural moment we're in, where people are like, if you're not seeing like a blown up arm in a trench, you're not getting a real depiction of the wars. And like, for me, I'm really disturbed that, you know, like a critic could come to that show and that would be their takeaway. When for me, I'm like, what's so incredible about this piece is it knows that there's like a tome of suffering in like the rewriting of Old Lang Syne to we're here because we're here because we're here because we're here, right? Yeah. Where these soldiers are just like the terror underneath that, right? Where it's like we no longer understand the purpose we serve here. We have no explanation for what we're doing here, right? Like we don't need a blown up arm to understand terror. Like there's terror in that song, right? And so I think this piece is really interesting in this moment in time because it refuses gratuity. And it actually, rather than trying to transform the narrative of these soldiers into something like for us to get our gritty kind of like anti-hero story, it's actually going, no, how did they suffer? How did they understand their suffering? What was the culture of their suffering? And one of the ways you can read the culture of their suffering is in the music. And that for me is like a profound shift from how we are currently often attuning ourselves to understand what the horrors of the war was. And so for me, it's like a really big departure actually from a lot of how World War I and World War II, this is obviously specifically World War I, but we really kind of collapsed narrativizations of those together. But it was a huge departure actually from what we are currently seeing with a piece like 1917.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well said, one and all. And I will be the first to say that this was a treat to get the band or troupe back together to revisit this time period with a different piece. So this was an absolute treat. Thank you all so much for coming out and to discuss our wonderful holiday episode, Christmas Truce, of 1914. So let us conclude our review by plugging our socials if you would like. So, Mr. Patrick T, Mr. PhD candidate himself, please, where can people find and follow you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at postmodernpat. I'm not a postmodernist. I just think it's a funny name. I actually am starting to use Twitter again, but not enough that I know my handle. So I'm just now opening it. I think it's Patrick Mike. Yeah. You can also follow me on Twitter at Patrick Michael T. But that will be like
lots of content.
Yeah, but that will not be any like theater stuff. That's just purely shit posting and then like academic subtweets. So you have to have a really particular interest for that one. But definitely follow me on Instagram at postmodern.
All right. Love it. Ms. Mackenzie Kelly, the representation of Germany herself.
Hello, it's me. Yeah, you can find me on TikTok and Instagram at mac.adamia 3.14195. I'm not a macadamia nut, nor am I good at math, but I thought macadamia pie was hilarious, much like Patrick's handle. I also don't really use Twitter, but if you want to follow me there, it's abstract.cat.
These handles are wonderful. They're killing Jill, though.
I can't believe I haven't picked up on the macadamia pie. Like, that is brilliant.
It's 3.14195.
Oh, gosh. So
159. I don't know. You'll find it.
Perfect. Wonderful. Jill, where can people find and follow you?
Yes, people can find and follow my artist Instagram account at jillian.robinson96. And if you are watching this episode or listening to it, I am in the thick of Rapunzel performances right now at the Annex Theater. We are doing Rapunzel pantomime for the families. So maybe I'm doing a double show day when you're listening to this. So excited to get back into that world again.
Yay.
Yay, Jill.
Yay, Jill.
Woo woo.
Woot woot.
Live theater. Okay.
Live theater. And so you can follow me at Mackenzie Horner, or you can follow my antics with Before the Downbeat Musical podcast, where I dive into all musicals. We just did an episode all about Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark, that debacle of a superhero musical. Gosh, that was a arduous experience, but we did it. We covered it, and we are about to release our big 50th extravaganza episode. So you'll have to tune in and find out what we're talking about for that one. My hint is that it features an iconic chandelier.
I'm not in it.
I wonder which one that is.
I know. How many musicals have a chandelier in them? Perfect. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, and we will see you all in the next episode. Thanks. Bye.